Welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'm the editor of Wetpixel, and we'd like to thank iCollite. I'd like to thank iCollite for sponsoring this episode. iCollite do a huge range of housings, strobes, ports, and accessories for most brands and models of cameras. So please head on over to iCollite.com to check out what they do. I thought today it would be an interesting exercise to talk a little bit about the issue of subject selection and how, as underwater photographers, we go about choosing subjects and how we should make decisions about which subjects are good for creating underwater imagery and which we possibly may decide not to attempt to capture. So with that in mind, I thought we should start off really with what is the motivation behind underwater photography. And obviously this is not a single answer. There are lots of different motivations as to why people get involved in taking pictures underwater. And of course, all of them are equally valid. I'm certainly not creating any kind of judgment in terms of value between them. But to broadly structure it, I guess one motivation would be cataloguing marine species. This can be from a personal point of view. So you may be seeking to catalogue marine species in a particular area, or in general the ones that you've seen. So it could be a personal catalogue. Or it could also be in terms of producing reference works, academic works, so on and so forth, where you're basically trying to document the species in a particular environment. And again, these could be coral species, fish species, they could be species of anything. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be fish species. So I guess we're talking about collecting a body of imagery which reflects a variety of species that you've chosen to document. The second, and I guess this is somewhat diametrically opposed to what generating a collection of species identification, is the artistic reason. So the goal here, I think, is probably to capture images of underwater species and seas in as artistic a way as possible. And this may even be a situation where it doesn't even reflect what you see in reality. So this could include things like capturing elements that you're then going to combine in post-production into a Photoshop production. So it may not even be that you're going to represent the scene you go underwater. Equally, it could be simply capturing the species you see underwater in creative ways that portray a particular feeling that you get from that animal or the scene that you're witnessing. It's an artistic, it's an interpretation of what you see, and this will be using photographic tools, obviously, and possibly post-production tools to achieve that goal. Important, it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. It reflects how you want it to reflect, and that I think we could define as being an artistic motivation in taking pictures underwater. We also get people that obviously want to generate image sales. So that's another motivation for being underwater. So if you're planning to sell images, there can be all sorts of reasons for doing that, but there are some techniques that you can deploy that will make your images more saleable. And possibly an example one here is that obviously shooting wide angle images tends to be easier to sell than selling macro photography. And similarly, having a model in the shot tends to mean that it's easier to get image sales. So that allows people to identify with the fact that it's underwater. They can see a diver in the picture, there's people in it, and that helps them to identify it. That can often make the image more saleable. So again, that's a motivation for capturing pictures underwater. It could also be a goal of documenting great natural phenomena that occur, coral spawning, whale shark aggregations, or aggregations of any animal underwater, fish breeding, and all the kind of predation, on major events like the sardine run, or on minor events, simply just watching, I don't know, squid fishing, at night. These are all things that can be motivations to catch things. And oftentimes, I guess the other thing to point in mind is that many of us will possibly fall into these categories at different times, and we may even combine these categories. So they're not limiting; they just tend to depict some sort of general idea about why people take pictures underwater. Obviously, the reason for mentioning this is that the way we choose our subjects will vary depending on what our motivation is with the picture that we're going to capture with the subject. And with that in mind as well, it's always wise that we need to carry out some research before we venture underwater. And the first thing is obviously is pre-trip research. So, if your goal is to capture a particular very rare species, a Meliba colmani, it's really good before you even go to the destination to find out if they're actually there. A few years ago, there was um, a few psychedelic frogfish were sighted in Ambon, and there was quite a generated quite a lot of interest amongst underwater photographers because they're rarely seen creatures, or certainly they were at that point. And so, people went, but they went to Ambon specifically to take pictures of the psychedelic frogfish because it was something that was unique and rare. So in general, what you want to do is you want to be making sure the creature that you're wanting to photograph is going to be there. And in many ways, if you're looking, for example, for big animals, knowing that you're going to find tiger sharks at Tiger Beach is probably a good motivation if your goal is to take pictures of tiger sharks, or knowing that if you go to the southern Red Sea in the summer months of the year, the northern hemisphere summer months of the year, you're more likely to find oceanic white tips. These are the kind of goals. So if that's your goal on the trip is to capture pictures of oceanic white tips, that's the time you want to go there. Again, speaking to local cruise environments, researching on Wetpixel, researching via social media, all the other tools that we can use to find out whether the critter we want to photograph is going to be there. And of course, this applies, if our goal is to take an artistic picture of an oceanic whitetip, the same would apply whether we want to capture one, because that's a species that's missing from our catalogue of species that we've captured. Pre-dive as well, we can spend a lot of time kind of we can do a bit of research. So now we're in the area that we're in, and let's find out. The local guides, particularly, are an amazing resource, and this is hopefully something that in post-COVID times we'll be able to access again. They have an incredible array of knowledge about not only where things are, but what they're doing at any given time. They know more about the local environment, the species that are in their local environment than we will probably ever know as visitors. So tap them up, use that resource, chat to the guys, chat to the local operators. They'll be able to tell you where the sharks are and what they're doing. They'll be able to tell you how they're going to behave. They'll be able to tell you what's the best place to be in to get that particular image that you're seeking. So, pre-dive research can really help you with your subject selection underwater. If they turn around and tell you, well, the sharks are all going to be against the reef on the bottom, then that will affect the way that you're going to try and capture the image, compared to if they're in blue water above the reef, for example. And so it's really, really useful to tap into that local knowledge. So once we've done all that research, we now go underwater. And underwater subject selection. Well, the first point is when we're underwater, time is limited. So we want to make sure that we're set up, that we get ourselves set up and get ourselves in a position to capture the images we want. So that will involve things like, and to be fair, this is before we get underwater, that we're using the correct lenses to capture the image that we want, be that a catalogue shot, be that a species identification shot, be that an artistic shot, be that an image for sale. It doesn't matter. Obviously, it's important that we make sure that we set our gear up to accomplish the photographic goals that we want from that particular subject. Once we get underwater, obviously time is always going to be pressing. So we never have enough time underwater, particularly when we're trying to capture imagery, because we've got to balance the time we spend against things like air supply, decompression status, cold, all the other issues that can affect us as divers and do affect us as divers. So once we get underwater, the first point is when we come across a subject, we should really consider whether how it's going to work photographically. And this is obviously something that It comes with experience, but we have a huge advantage now with digital cameras in that we can shoot some pictures and we can see whether it's working. And in general, okay, once we've sorted out exposure and our strobe position and possibly our lighting, depending on how we're doing it, once we've done that, we can generally pretty rapidly make a judgment call as to whether this shot's going to work or not. And the honest answer is that once you've made that call, move on. Or carry on shooting, sorry. So if you decide the shot's not going to work, you need to move on. That's quite a brave move, particularly if this is a subject you've been really wanting to capture. But if it isn't working, it's probably not going to get any better and you just need to move on. Obviously, you can try and experiment with different techniques, but I find in general, first impressions are pretty good and you will generally find that your first impressions were probably correct. So take your time. Take some time, get yourself set up, get some pictures in the bag, have a look and see what they look like on the monitor, make any obvious corrections that you can make, go back. And if it's working, obviously keep shooting. If it's not, you're probably not going to manage with that subject in that position. While we're on the subject when we're underwater, we're swimming about underwater, particularly in macro critter-rich destinations, and the dive guides are kind of almost obliged to show you the most interesting, most unique, most bizarre creatures they can. The fact is that, and this is something Alex often relates to in his workshops, his best-selling picture from Ember is a picture of an enemy fish. And frequently you'll find that the case. I often find that pictures of stuff that we consider very ordinary and mundane, Banggai cardinalfish from the Lembeh Strait, are incredibly popular subjects. They're very beautiful little fish. But obviously, again, there's no dive guide in the world that's going to sit and point out, look, there's a Banggai cardinalfish, because there's thousands of them. So these are the kinds of things that we really want to consider when we're shooting and look at things in the whole. If you've got Banggai cardinalfish against a nice purple enemy background, consider taking pictures of it, because that may well be something that achieves a really pleasing result. And the result is a very attractive, pleasing, popular, and potentially profitable photo. It may also, of course, be something that you could use in compositions. You can shoot them creatively to create particular artistic effects, so on and so forth. So don't necessarily go into the realm of, it needs to be something super rare. And as I say, the dive guides are not going to show you an enemy fish. They're not going to. You get an enemy fish and a purple anemone, that's really, if it's in the right position, that's probably a winning picture that people will enjoy and you'll get a great deal out of. When we're underwater, I like the idea of we either stick with the subject or we flip, and I think we should make the decision fairly quickly. Obviously, flip, move on to another subject. In other words, if it's not working, spending too much time with the subject trying to force it to work generally means that we're probably not going to get a great deal further on. Okay, a few ideas about subject selection. I'm sure there's lots of other stuff to talk about, and please feel free to add any comments or suggestions about your ideas on subject selection in the comment section. We'd like to thank iGuides again very much for sponsoring this episode. We couldn't make these episodes without our sponsors, so we really appreciate the support. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Please drop us a like if you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you again soon.